evening, Patriots. I'm Jill Savage. We're coming to you from our nation's capital. Let me go ahead and introduce our panel, of course, as always, joined by our editor-in-chief, Matthew Peterson. It's always a treat when we get our D.C. correspondent, Chris Bedford, in person. We have a special guest joining us from the top of the show, Mark Meadows. He's the president of Conservative Partnership Institute and Trump's former chief of staff. So, gentlemen, what a beautiful day that we have here in the nation's capital. Now, you two are very accustomed to everything here in D.C., but when Matthew and I, when we get out, we're very excited to be on the road and just seeing all the new energy that's happening here in town.
Well, there is a lot of energy, and welcome to the swamp. You know, the high humidity is something that comes with the swamp, but, you know, most people think it's a hot tub here. At least the elected members of Congress think it's a hot tub. And yet your viewers, the people that are tuned in right now, they know it's a swamp because it's trying to take over Main Street across the country. But welcome to the nation's capital. A lot of stuff going on just a few yards from where we are right now. And, you know, Chris and I get used to this, but welcome from the great Republic of Texas, as some of the people from Texas would say.
You know, I think the idea behind putting DC here, we're going to put it in a swamp with rivers and hills and mosquitoes. So if the British ever come back, they can't take it. And the British were like, we're coming back. And it wasn't an issue. So maybe we could move a little north. Just a little north.
So, I mean, growing up, I thought that it was a terrible place because of that humidity, because I hadn't experienced anything that bad coming from the Northeast at the time. But after moving to Dallas, I will say that the weather is actually mild here compared to some places.
That's why you air condition your garages,
especially this time of the year. You know, yeah. So I mean, I think that Los Angeles, which is obviously in the news here lately, I found out why people actually wanted to live there. I left here one day. It was 28 degrees. I got off the plane in Los Angeles, and it was 78 degrees. I said, wow, it's not so bad. 6 months later, it's 102 degrees here. I get off the plane in Los Angeles, and again, it's 78 degrees. So the weather is great. The politics are terrible, and obviously what's happening there now is not good.
Well, you figured it out. That's where I moved from to Texas, because that's how terrible indeed it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Matthew knows this all too well with the LA riots. They were all kind of just going back and forth being like, oh, riot season, of course. You see it. It's a Monday afternoon. The paid protesters are coming out. They need their paychecks as well. But take us a little bit through what you've seen from that. And just it's almost like it's the left's playbook at this point in time. And do you think this is an isolated incident, or do you think that this is a sign of things to come?
Well, I think it's a sign of things to come, with one exception. President Trump has been through this before, and now all of a sudden what he's saying is, you're not going to take over our cities and our states. He is engaging. I can tell you, I was with him in the White House back in the 2020 summer of 2020 when we saw
Summer of Love.
Well, it wasn't the Summer of Love, but that's what they tried to portray it as. But the inaction, and a lot of that happened because of governors and mayors and people, whether it was in Washington State or Minnesota or Wisconsin, they wanted to do the pushback. And the president, honestly, he's not having it this time because he's seen what his gut reaction was then, and he's going to follow that instinct now. So it will spread, but not. It will not be systemic. And I think what his actions that are taken are not only justified, but welcomed by most Americans.
I'm glad that Patrick Buchanan was able to still be here to see somebody finally send in the Marines when Los Angeles gets lit on fire. He knew what to do in 1992, and people didn't listen. And now it's over. It's done. But I feel like a lot of that might be also because the LA riots in 1992 were grassroots. There was rage.
Well, these are orchestrated.
Yeah.
You know, they're orchestrated not only on social media, but there's all kinds of incentives. I can tell you there was a protester, whether this is true or not, but there was a protester outside the Supreme Court, literally 1 block from where we're recording this right now. And that protester, somebody said, you know, they were just loud and obnoxious. And they said, hey, listen, we'll give you $100 if you just go away during this presser. And the protester responded, I'm getting paid more than that. Yeah. So a true capitalist as a leftist protester. But, you wonder if those things are true, but we can say these are not organic. They're not grassroots, as you were talking about, but they are designed to send a message. And that message is all about trying to make sure that the ICE agents and those that are doing their job become fearful. But I'm telling you, the men and women who serve in ICE and Border Patrol, they're having none of it. They've got a president who has their back. They have the president's back, and the American people will see the difference.
Well, it's laughable because Karen Bass, she was coming out and saying, oh, well, if it wasn't for all these ICE agents coming around trying to do the deportations, we wouldn't have riots. But you look, and elections have consequences. This is what the American people voted for. This was one of the very central issues of the Trump campaign. And now they're going out and trying to execute the plan that the American people voted for.
And what's happening to President Trump's poll numbers among those that have come here as immigrants is going way up, but not just for those who say, I want to secure the border. It's the people who have come here legally and said, listen, we need to control the border. And that's been the surprising thing, I think, to the left. They're starting to say, how in the world are his numbers going up? But while they're looking for a constituency, President Trump is looking out for his constituency. And there's the difference. They're trying to find a group of people that will vote for them. And so whether it's Mayor Bass or any of the others, it is really troubling to see listen, over half of Congress voted against a resolution condemning what happened in Colorado just yesterday. I mean, can you imagine that? Why? Because it had ICE in there and it talked about sanctuary cities, and they couldn't stand up against that.
No, Matt, we were just talking about this a second ago, how the Democrats have really tried to typecast different groups into one homogenous thing, whether it's immigrants and illegal immigrants. That's all one voting block. They don't realize that illegal immigrants come and they commit crimes in communities where a lot of legal immigrants actually live, and they don't actually like that. Or they assumed that Hispanic workers and immigrants would rise during Black Lives Matter, but those were two distinct groups with distinct missions, distinct goals, and communities that don't always. Sometimes there's friction amongst the working classes, and now they're looking at this riot, and you're seeing mostly college students. You're not seeing workers really rise up. You're not seeing the same people who are out rioting during Black Lives Matter or protesting during Black Lives Matter. Their reads on everyone seems to be incorrect.
Yeah, that means so. One thing we were talking about is that the tipping point has to be where you get enough, impoverished people who are living in these areas to go out and loot and riot and whatever and feel like it's okay. And the irony is, I mean, how many people who are actually here illegally want to go out and stick their neck out? I mean, they're hiding, they're scared of being, deported, and they should be. But this orchestrated effort is a problem, and I'm curious. There is a difference, as you were talking about, in the environment over the course of time from the first administration to now. I think a lot of people in the audience want to see actual action against those who organize this, and it's interesting to me how we weren't even allowed to talk about that for some reason. You couldn't say Antifa should be an international terrorist group without people saying Antifa doesn't even exist.
Right.
So now, do you think we're at the point where this administration is actually going to really hold these people accountable?
Well, I think they're going to hold them accountable. Kash Patel, Director Patel at the FBI will certainly be all hands on deck in terms of this particular issue, and really get support not only in the Oval Office but at DOJ. That hasn't been the case even under the previous Trump administration. We know that the pushback was internal. It was this silent kind of, we're not going to raise the issue. But to your point, you said Mayor Bass said, well, if you just didn't do this, this wouldn't happen. Well, we know that that's not the case because they don't prosecute for shoplifting. And what have they seen? Exponential shoplifting that goes on. So here's what I do believe is your viewers do want to see a day of reckoning, but it's not just a day of reckoning on the streets of Los Angeles or whatever city that we happen to be deploying assets to. They want to see it at the highest levels of the coordinating activity that is there. And until we get to that, this chaos, this paid chaos that's going on, it's going to be repeated.
Well, I want to get into more of Trump in his second term, because I think the last time that we saw you in person was actually on Inauguration Day when we were doing our show here. So let's go and just give us a breakdown of what you've seen from Trump in this administration since we last saw you in person on January 20th.
You know, it's breathtaking. It's such an encouragement to me. I talked to the president over the weekend just about some of the successes that we've seen. But whether you take it from foreign policy or the border or the economic ability of America First policies actually being instituted, what he's doing in terms of making our cities safer, you see it across the board, but I don't know how he has the bandwidth to get it all done. Having served with him, I know he never sleeps. And so you guys know that. All three of you know that he never sleeps. But here's the interesting thing is, even with him not sleeping right now, he is deploying one task after another, to the point where even reporting on it, it is very difficult to keep up. It's something new today, tomorrow. He was in Fort Bragg yesterday. He's going all over. But I would give him not only an A+, but the reason why his poll numbers are going through the roof is that the American people are saying, finally, somebody is doing what they said they would do. Because listen, it's a systemic problem with both Democrats and Republican members of Congress, where they campaign like they're going to do something and they never do it. And yet this president he's not letting his cabinet do that. Susie Wiles, his chief, is doing an outstanding job. For me, it's what we had hoped was going to happen in 2021. We had to wait 4 years of Biden progressive left awful policy, but it shows a very, very sharp contrast.
I was very interested in your take on this, thinking about this from a chief of staff perspective. Right. And I sort of imagine, looking at this now, you're thinking this is what we wanted to do, which is
right.
What
we were prepared to do in the end of 2020.
Yes. But say a little bit more about the difference, because it seems like from what you were saying earlier, the question was the internal division that was there before is not there now. Is that?
No, listen, you're going to always, you've got great big personalities. Right. You're always going to have some strife that's going on and different agendas. But here's what he's got his entire cabinet saying is what he used to say on each and every day. What's next? What's the next thing we need to tackle on behalf of the American people? What's the next thing we need to do well? He wants us to be tired of winning. I'm not there yet, but let me just tell you, we're well on our way to be tired of winning. And it's going to make big, big shoes for the next Republican nominee that comes after him. I can tell you, I've watched him in the budget debates in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, actually going back and forth with these members of Congress and now senators. He's personally engaged and not just twisting arms, but he is negotiating. The mogul that he was is now a political mogul that's producing real results for the American people.
And you didn't see that with previous Republican presidents. You didn't really see that with Democratic presidents either, that personal involvement. Now, from the outside, people trying to keep up with the latest news and on reconciliation. Originally, the question was, salt caps dominated a lot of headlines, but you're always worried about different aspects of it. What are some of the stumbling blocks that you see coming out next? What should people actually have their eye on for these negotiations, for where it's going to get, where sticking points for senators that could become sticking points for the House of Representatives, that could end up being sticking points for the administration's agenda?
Well, you're covering this, right now. You're up close and personal to it here in the nation's capital. But probably the two biggest stumbling blocks that I see on whether the big beautiful bill gets done is if Leader Thune continues down the path where he's going right now. He's been committed to real cuts, which has been refreshing. I didn't see that under Leader McConnell too often. But the biggest concern I have right now is there are a few senators that are wanting to make the bill better. As a former House member, I've never seen the Senate make anything better. But I'm open to it. And so those senators are actually making very constructive recommendations to the White House and to Leader Thune. That's going to come to conflict within the next 48 hours with the committees, where the committees are going to try to water some things down, and that's going to be the big rub. Now, there's also a danger that they go too far, and then it comes back to the House, and the moderates in the House say, golly, I can't make that happen. And so it's on a razor's edge. Do I believe it gets done by July 4th? Yes. Leader Thune did a wonderful thing today by saying that they're going to have to stay in if they don't pass it by July 4th, which means it'll pass by July 4th.
It's a good tactic.
There's no way they're missing going home. So they'll be on. The jet fumes are already starting to leak out from Reagan.
They want to get on that road.
Yeah, that's right.
It seems like some of those people are trying to make it better, are pushing ideas. Yeah. Like maybe we should return to pre-COVID funding, which are reasonable in every place in the world except for D.C.
Right.
And people seem surprised watching from the outside that these Republicans, some of these senators, some of these committees don't seem to want to do that. But it seems like if they'd ever wanted to do that, they would have fought for it over the last 3 or 4 years. So
yeah, they should have fought for it. Oh, well, listen, Senator Johnson that you're talking about, pre-COVID levels, and those that have aligned with him philosophically there, understand that Washington, D.C. is addicted. They're addicted to spending. There's two kinds of people that are addicted, Democrats and Republicans. And so there are a few conservatives that are willing to push back. Senator Johnson and I have had multiple conversations over the last 72 hours about how do we continue that effort? How do we continue that Doge effort? How do we actually cut back? Because there are a group of 6 to 7 senators who want to spend more money. And that's what this whole pushback is all about. At the end, I think we do end up cutting spending.
We're going to continue this conversation. We're going to take a break right now, but when we come back, we're going to talk about Elon and Trump and trying to keep this coalition together. Stay with us. Family farms aren't shutting down because they've stopped working hard. They've shut down because the meat in your grocery store, it's not coming from them anymore. It's actually coming from overseas. And we know that they have the sketchy standards, sketchy labels. Most people, they don't even know it. Over 85% of the so-called grass-fed beef on U.S. shelves is actually imported. That's why you need to go to goodranchers.com, because you know it's 100% American. It's born, raised, and harvested right here by family ranchers who've been doing it the right way for generations. And it's not just about all the patriotism. It's about the taste. Their meat is seriously next level. And Father's Day is coming up. You can grab their King Cut box loaded with thick cut ribeyes, strips, and fillets. Your dad is going to open it and say, now this is a gift. And when you subscribe today, you can actually get your free pick of meat for life. You can choose from Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, wings, in every box with the lifetime of your subscription. Plus, when you use the code Jill at checkout, you'll get an extra $40 off. So go to goodranchers.com now and support American farms. Eat better. And don't forget, use the promo code Jill for free meat for life plus $40 off. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Well, there's so much going on in Washington, D.C., and there was a lot going on social media. I don't know if anybody followed along with this, but there was somebody named Elon Musk, and there was somebody named Donald Trump, and they weren't getting along for a period of time, but things have been smoothed over. Elon came out today on social media and said, you know what? I think I went too far. So I don't know. Are we going to see the best friends get back together? What is this looking like now? The Elon Musk, Donald Trump dynamic at this point in time?
Well, I think everybody chose their hero, and it was President Trump. They sided with President Trump in this conflict. But yeah, I think they get back together. Maybe not the way that it was, where literally when you saw President Trump, you saw Elon. But I will say that Elon Musk was able to highlight something that the president has been highlighting for a long time, and that is government spends your money, our money, in an inappropriate way. And, it gives drunken sailors a good name for spending the way they spend compared to the way that government spends. And so Elon did a good job with that, and him helping pass the baton to the next Doge effort will be critical. The president realizes this. Listen, if I were the president, my feelings would have been hurt. So you forget that these are real individuals. My relationship with President Trump is one that we've laughed together. We've certainly been angry together, and yet people don't realize the amount of time that he spent on this big, beautiful bill. I mean, untold hours. If the American people, the people tuned in right now, if they understood how much this president cares about them personally, not just broadly, but personally, they would be moved and touched by it. And yet he'd spent so much time, and then for Elon to go out and tweet against that, it was personal. Did Elon go too far with some of the accusations? Yes, without a doubt. I don't believe him. Listen, some of the things he said, I can tell you, the Democrats would have weaponized that long ago. It would have been out there. They make up things to weaponize, so let alone if there was any truth to it. So I do see them getting back together, the coalition there, not in intimate settings necessarily in the Oval, but do I believe that Elon Musk will be back in the Oval under some shape, form, or fashion, a bill signing? Yeah, I think so. And hopefully today is the start of repairing that relationship, and kudos to these two great leaders for doing that.
This goes to something that is probably the main concern that I have, and a lot of people that I know have, thinking about what's going on and how far can we go amidst all the wins. And Elon, like you said, he highlighted things that were part of the President Trump's agenda. Doge, I don't even know if people here understand how popular that concept is nationally, right? Yeah. And my worry with Elon was there'd be a lot of people here who, and I kind of get their perspective too, would be, oh, a business interloper, I'm here with the, we know what we're doing and we don't need Elon. But Elon was an important part of the coalition because he did what you just said, which he was part of the agenda and pushing it forward in a way that made it popular and interesting and, dare I say it, cool or cutting edge. But that's all for the sake of one goal, and that is actual structural reform of the system of government that is in place now. And this is where, it all comes to. This is the whole point of everything we're doing. So I want to ask you about where you see this going, but I want to ask this in a broad way. I think that everyone knows that what needs to change is structural.
Right.
And the problem is, and I think the American people do understand this as well, that doing that, involving the three branches of government, is exceedingly difficult. I think they recognize that fact.
Right.
So how do you see this? It really is still early, right? How do you see this unfolding so far? Because you can have really good people in really good positions trying to do really good things. But there's I think a sense that's increasing. It's more than ever since I've been alive, of a percentage of the American people who realize there actually has to be real change, and how are we going to get that done?
Yeah, I think that real change, or that reformation of government, so to speak, is something that is only going to happen if President Trump continues to be successful and continues to actually make real cuts. And I'm going to listen. Here's the thing: is real cuts in Congress. It doesn't start with an M. It starts with a B, and it ends up adding up to a T. So billions and trillions of dollars are the real cuts. But it's the one thing that Elon Musk was able to do was show what the American people are spending their taxpayer dollars on, and the American people said, I'd had enough. I mean, I love it when the Democrats have to go and defend some of the programs that USAID were spending their money on. But I'm just telling you, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's a much bigger effort that could take place. But to your point, the biggest impediment is in that dome building that's just a few blocks from here, is because they all run like they're conservatives, MAGA, we're with Trump all the time. And the truth of it is, most of them are not. They campaign back home as if they're MAGA, and they come up here and they're more like Minnie Mouse. And so I'm concerned about that. But so how do we do that? We have to do it through the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, rescissions. The president has to put real pressure on members of Congress. We're going to have an appropriations process here in a few months. And that appropriations process is going to end like every other appropriations process has been. We're either going to do a CR or we're going to do some kind of omnibus that spends more money. And the American people have had enough. And so if we don't, the one thing that this president will do is call them out. And I say, God bless him. Let him call them out. If it's time that they go home and use their talents elsewhere, it's time they go home. Most people that vote, even the people that are very informed, they hate Congress, but they love their congressman. Congress has an approval rating less than a cockroach, and yet they continue to get reelected. It's time. I do believe it starts in the executive branch, and if the legislative branch wants to be relevant at all, they need to reinvent themselves. They need to have a metamorphosis to actually say, we're going to take control of the budgeting process. Let's look back to what's responsible for the American people.
You had a front row seat to the first administration's attempts to pass rescissions, and those were not controversial things. They were money that had not been spent, and more money had been appropriated, so no one was threatened. But they said, well, how can we threaten waterways? How could we threaten children's health care, even though this was money that wasn't spent and could just go back to the Treasury? This rescissions package comes forward with some things that are near and dear to U.S. senators, Mitch McConnell and USAID. You've got Senators Murkowski and Collins who just don't want to touch PBS and NPR because of some nostalgic ideas, I suppose, or it's apparently essential to keeping people alive in Alaska. Do you actually see this being able to get through the Senate? Because if it dies here, it's hard to see more rescissions coming.
Well, I think there's two kinds of rescissions. So I don't think it dies. I think that you end up picking up, and part of this is the wonderful way that President Trump is able to negotiate, even with people like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, maybe not Mitch McConnell as much, but the two of them, they represent Maine and Alaska. So how, the president can make it very clear, we'll help Maine and Alaska in this area. And actually, he has been laser focused on some of the people in Maine. And so Susan Collins understands that lobster fishermen understand the importance of Donald Trump more so than perhaps others. But to your point is if we do not get that done, Chris, if this rescission doesn't get done, then the administration is going to take it in their own hands. And there's such a thing, there are other rescissions, other ways that are constitutionally, legally protected that you can start cutting. And quite frankly, I would be surprised to not see those deployed if they don't act on. Listen, this rescission package that is up there right now should be an easy win. What is they call it? Fresh air? Is that the PBS? It's called. It's not fresh air to a conservative. I can just tell you that it is very. Skunk smells better than fresh air. Let's just put it that way. And so this should be an easy one. We should get out of the House tomorrow, hopefully out of the House, and then send it on. And if need be, let's attach it to something they want.
Fantastic. It seems like it might be hard to push, but if the president's more actively engaged than he's ever been, or at least that I've ever seen, than any president's been on this kind of legislation and willing to make those deals, and you can actually get something done in the deep Kamala Harris plus 8 state like Maine. It's a hard spot to be in, I suppose.
Yes, but here's the interesting thing is media has changed. The very fact that we have people here, and by the way, you're right, a great Father's Day gift would be to subscribe to Blaze and make sure with that they take advantage of that 30% discount. I'm all in.
Yep.
So, but we're getting media in a very different way. The days of PBS, are going, if they want to compete, let them compete with their own subscribers and head to head with what you do and everybody else. It's time that we cut out the government funding. You wouldn't take government funding if it was offered to you. Well, why? Because it gives you a certain bias, and they know that the Democrats are their greatest constituency here on Capitol Hill. So we need to send a clear message from the Republicans.
How many millions are we talking here? Maybe we could make a deal.
What a deal we can make.
That sounds like a pretty good place to end it. Mark Meadows, we always appreciate your time. And thank you so much just to the Conservative Partnership Institute for all the hospitality every time that we come out here.
It's great to be with you. You're always welcome. God bless.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Mike Howell from Oversight Project right after this. All the ladies, listen up. Father's Day is almost here, and if you're still scrambling for a gift, don't worry. I've got you covered. He doesn't need another tie, another coffee mug. What your guy really needs is something that speaks to who he is, our culture. It mocks masculinity, all the traditional values, fatherhood. What he needs is a place that still has his back. And that's where Blaze TV comes in. It's where unapologetic, because Blaze TV stands up for what's right. It's faith, family, and freedom. And right now you can grab our Father's Day special. It's an extra $30 off your annual subscription when you use code DAD30, but it's good for this week only. It's fast, easy. You don't have to wrap anything, and it actually means something. So if you've waited to get something, this is your moment for a big win on Father's Day, and you can think of it as peace of mind. This Father's Day, give him a gift that really matters. Go to blazetv.com/BNT and use the code DAD30 to grab a deal that shows him that it's still cool to love America. Mass deportations were a huge part of Trump's 2024 campaign. However, now that he's back in office, some Republicans are softening their stance. For more, we're joined by Oversight Project President Mike Howell, one of our favorites. Great to see you in person again, as always. I love coming in here in D.C. and just seeing everybody right here in person. It's a good feeling.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. So
I like it on Twitter, too.
Good.
Yeah.
That's where I live.
M. Howell tweets. Everybody should go follow him now. Who are all these Republicans that are softening on their stances, and how are they actually splitting from Trump on immigration? Because this doesn't seem like a great strategy.
It's a terrible strategy, an awful one, but I'm so glad it's out in the open. I've been yelling about this for months. I know a lot of us agree on this. A lot of Republicans were not down with the mass deportation agenda, and they're waiting to the most inopportune time to say so out loud. They had no problem, as banners were being waved to the RNC that said mass deportation. President Trump was, riding to a landslide victory, keeping quiet then. But now the reconciliation's coming up, and there's these riots in LA. These members are going to Axios, all on record, all at the same time, telling Trump to scale it back. So now we no longer need wonder. We know where people stand. They're even dropping the H-bomb. They said as Hispanic members, they get more of a say in this. And I think that's really revealing that they're thinking through those racialized leftist terms.
Yeah. So what's the trajectory of this? I mean, because you get a lot of people saying right now when it comes to polling, I think Chris might have mentioned earlier that, and so did Mark Meadows, and the congressman came on and said, what everyone's seeing is that these people are in the audience are actually doing the opposite. They're hardening. You see it in the comments. You see it throughout the country. This is not like it was 4 or 5 years ago. So how long do you think, if ever, does Congress get to catch up?
Yeah, good question. Hopefully not for long. Obviously, the political tension here is the White House really wants to retain control for the midterms. And so you have these politicians flexing their muscles in an environment where they're probably getting more leeway than they otherwise would. So I hope the hammer does drop down on these members who are going to thwart the central plank of the agenda. I think, Chief Meadows referred to them as kind of MAGA on the campaign trail and different when they get to D.C. I think we got to call them the Rhinestone Cowboy Caucus because, they go down to the border, they put on the cowboy hat, they yell about border security and immigration enforcement all campaign season. And then they get up here and they run to Axios and say, wait, that's too much. We didn't mean deport people. We meant just like a couple people, Obama, Biden level style deportations. And that's not what anyone voted for. And President Trump's in a tough spot because this is what the administration will be judged on. I think the number one number that history will judge this administration by is how many illegals did you remove? And it's got to have commas. It's got to be in the millions.
Chris, I just lost my train of thought for a minute because all I could hear is like a rhinestone.
And I was thinking,
And Glenn Campbell, there's nothing wrong with Glenn Campbell. Like, Pache Glenn Campbell.
We got a lot of Glenn Campbell up here.
But yes.
I love the Rhinestone Age in Nashville. I mean, it's phenomenal. You get the Zooty suits and everything looking phenomenal, shining. I'm going to see Dwight Yoakam later this year, and his whole backup band still wears the whole Rhinestone bit. It seems like some of these senators are going to end up eating crow. You got Van Hollen out there, so he's besties with someone, and now he's trying to claim, it's not about one man, but that guy's going to come back. And if the administration has their game together, which I sure hope they do, then he's going to be sentenced for some serious and heinous crimes. Saying you might see some of that for some Republican members, but who is even what is holding them back from wanting to do this? I mean, their voters, Trump beat almost all of them in return counts in the election, support this. Illegal immigrants have switched to +5, +6 with Republicans for handling immigration. You see the New York Times and Politico playbook and all these things saying, whoa, Los Angeles, really bad look. And you have an administration that is different. I remember in the first administration, there was I had an on-background comment at the time saying the Insurrection Act might be used. And a comms guy at the White House called up and said, I don't know what senior White House official you were talking to. I don't know if it was Miller or someone like that. And I eventually had to say, it was the president. I came from the president. And they're like, oh. And just hung up the phone after that. But Miller's come back stronger than he ever was before. The president is entirely on board with this. So if they don't have the administration, they don't have their voters. The Walmart board is getting smaller every day. It's not as tangible a target for a lot of these guys upon retirement. What caucus are they representing when they try to block the American people on this?
Yeah, good question. Illegal aliens is the very simple and short answer, but some constructive criticism for my friends in the administration. I've been public with this for months. They have given permission to this caucus to speak out. Politically, they have made the calculation they can get away with this without being punished. And they had been given that permission by months of the administration being of mixed messaging on mass deportations. On one hand, they'll stand by and fight for the Maryland man and say, due to the fact of his MS-13 connection, we're deporting him because he's a criminal and because it's MS-13. And you look at the DHS Twitter feed, and it's all pictures of criminals. And you see the secretary saying criminal illegal aliens. And you see it over and over, and you hear it. So these members think, I can go back home and say, I only support that limited vantage point. So the administration, I think to their credit, today, Carolyn Leavitt at the White House press briefing tried clearing this up, saying, no, we really mean everybody. The aperture is that wide. I know that's what Tom Homan thinks. But then some other core problems are like ICE is not used to this. The men and women at ICE want to go after the hardened criminals. Like it's you got to think of these 1811s and like these cops or law enforcement officers within the federal bureaucracy. They want to be chasing the drugs and the people they think lends to the next promotion. And going to the Home Depot and rounding up illegal aliens doesn't look like that hardened like criminal activity they want on their resume. And so there's bureaucratic tension. You have half of ICE, which is Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, who doesn't even want to touch illegal aliens. They want to chase down counterfeit Super Bowl merchandise. And then you have the caucuses back home with the industry. Huge. I mean, you would think. Huge problem.
Well, let's bridge a couple of different things right now, because we know we got to the open borders policy because of the Biden administration, but who was actually running the Biden administration? We don't know. So Oversight Project, autopen, we've talked about this a couple different times. So tell us a little bit more about Donald Trump's latest statements about the autopen and where this is all going to go from here.
So a lot of things are happening at the same time. Late last week, President Trump issued an executive order ordering a review of these things, and it charged certain people within his administration to go back and gather documents. So that's going to take place in a number of places. You have the pardon attorney, U.S. Martin, who's going to look at the pardon office. I don't think much will be there because they're running these plays through the White House. You're going to have the White House looking at record sets as like who was delegated the use of the autopen, authorized to use it, who used it for what, which document, et cetera. And then you have a House and a Senate investigation. The Senate investigation, or is more of a hearing actually, will be next week. They'll have witnesses talk particularly about the constitutional implications of not having a president. That's pretty big issue, right? You kind of need one, and we didn't have one. And then the House is bringing people in for testimony, like the core Biden team of advisors. So what's next is, I think the next big shoe to drop in the evidentiary pile will be the testimony of the staffers. Are they going to come in and all be on the same page? Are they going to plead the fifth? Are they going to invoke executive privilege? I don't know. Also, Oversight Project is cooking up some other category of things that were auto-penned. And a lot of money moved around this White House, and a lot of decisions about money were moving around the White House. And I don't think there was a president during that period of time.
There were also paintings going for $500,000 at that time. So I'm sure everything is probably just going to be fine.
You know, we talked about the liquid natural gas ban with Daniel Turner and Power of the Future, and how we have from the Speaker of the House that the president didn't even know that that was a thing, which originally at the time, I'm looking back at all these different news stories and saying, well, I chalked it up to him not quite knowing what was going on, but I didn't realize how little he knew what was going on. Maybe he never knew that they'd put through a liquid natural gas ban. Are you discovering orders like that outside of that ban specifically, where we have contemporaneous evidence the president didn't seem to know what was going on? And what kind of response can we actually see? You had people, I remember under President Barack Obama, there was a legal fight over where was the birth certificate? Trump was at the center of that one. But there was obviously, they weren't going to depose a president. So when you've got a former president and you've got these auto pens and you've got things that there's evidence, contemporaneous evidence that he didn't have any idea about this, do those just go poof? Do those go away? Do people go to prison? What are the crimes here?
So we've laid out a series of crimes that could be implicated by this. You know, obviously impersonation of a federal official is a big one. I think we're looking at potential bribery because it relates to a lot of money moving to places against the national interest where people had a very obvious financial stake. You have forgery, the affixing of a signature that's not yours. You also have secondary crimes of like misprision of a felony. If everyone knew there was no president and was watching this show go on and said nothing, they're part of the conspiracy, and that is a crime. And so you get into like degrees of it. And then there will be a series of subpoenas that go out that could be contested. And then you could have this Steve Bannon fact pattern emerge. Like what happens if Biden's advisors refuse to testify? Will they get the Steve Bannon treatment? So I see this being a several years long legal fight. But one contextual thing about this environment is this is an unusual White House for a lot of reasons. Not only that Biden was like not even president, it's that they passed trillions of dollars through a couple vehicles and then vested the authority to basically disperse that money through the White House. Trillions of dollars through Inflation Reduction Act, the transportation bill, and the COVID scam. All went to the White House, and then the money went out through Podesta and others. And when you look at kind of the throwing the gold bars off the Titanic at EPA, that is the norm. That wasn't the unusual event. That's what this administration looked like, and I think that's what the autopen was ruling over.
It is insane that this is actually real life because they wouldn't let you do this script in Hollywood, and yet this is what we've actually lived through. Don't go anywhere, Mike. We're going to come back, and we're actually going to do some Ask Bedford Anything to wrap up the show right after this. Well, we are back here in Washington, D.C., and we love it when Chris Bedford's here, but unfortunately, it's going to be the only day this week that Bedford will be joining us here in person. So we had to put his feet to the fire with an Ask Bedford Anything. I asked you on X for your questions, and you know what? We are going to start with one of our friends, Terry Schilling. And I told him, we don't need to make this easy, right? So he says, Chris, you've met a ton of journalists in your career. Who's the worst journalist in the game?
Oh,
Terry's
man.
being kind.
Ooh, Terry's
That's-
like, make someone a public enemy right
That's
now.
actually hard. I mean, is it like Oliver Darcy, that like little weasel whose job it is to tattle on his friends? Is it Ryan Lizza? Is he still a journalist? That guy who once was happily married to the family, and then you see him with these little hemp bracelets hanging out with people 20 years younger on rooftop barbecues and Foggy Bottom like a total loser. Is it Jeffrey Toobin, who offered to pay for an abortion for the daughter of one of his colleagues to get rid of the pregnancy? Or maybe Ryan Williams, who talked at the NHL game and got an award for surviving in terrible combat in Iraq. Turns out he didn't. But what he did actually do was sit around with his family, including his wife, and watch his daughter's scene in a television show where she was engaged in some extremely explicit sexual behavior. Is it Jake Tapper, who slips into the DMs of literally like young interns that I've hired before, not to say nice things, but to curse them out like a big bully and a total psychopath? Or is it maybe Taylor Lorenz, who at this point thinks that calling masked ICE agents is something that others people with masks, and is also trying to take down, I guess, the Zionist-operated government of the United States? Turns out to not be the most mentally balanced person out there. There are some people out there who I hate even more than that, but since I have to deal with them still every day, I'll keep that peace for now.
You know what I love about you is that I knew you would not only have zero problem with this question, but the fact that you just listed off like 10 people makes it even better.
You have no idea how bad they are. They're so awful.
That was really like the answer was, who's the worst journalist in your career? Like, all of them.
Yeah.
All of them.
I mean, it's not just like,
They're
oh,
bad.
that guy's a liberal. It's like, that's a really honest to God awful person, a really bad person deep down in their core.
Let's go ahead and skip ahead to Harris's reply, because he said, what are the most overrated and underrated museums in the DC area? It's been a long time since he's been here, and the history buffs need to know.
Oh my gosh! I will say one thing about the Museum of the Bible, which I'm in and out on. It's how great it is to visit, but it's a cool spot. If you do go there, go to the top floor, the floor that's like a lobby space. But right now, if you go up there, they have the actual mosaic from Israel of the earliest church floor in existence, where they found it when they were excavating, when they were increasing a prison there, and it wasn't safe to keep it there. So now it's traveling until they could build a permanent space. And then they have some of the Nicene scrolls coming to town. That's phenomenal. It's been the kids are always going to love the Air and Space Museum, but the one that's in DC, it's not that great except for movies. The one that is in Dulles is absolutely massive. So if your kids are into airplanes and spaceships, you got to go there and check it out, and you can maybe field questions from them. It's like, did people really fly to the moon in that tinfoil and plastic? It's like, my grandfather worked on it. He promises me they did. That's an excellent one. And there are some others that they light up like an African crown at night on the middle of the National Mall, look like a sand crawler, that definitely portray a kind of a perverted history of America that's only one-sided. And I'd say the biggest letdown, and I was really bummed by this, was the American Indian Museum. Because, I mean, if you look at like the history of the Cherokee, they get a hold of the horse after it gets off of a Spanish galleon, and they are the freaking Dothraki horde. They take over half of the United States on horseback. They are the most fearsome people on the planet. But if you go to the museum there, they don't want to talk about that. They're like, look at these clay pots we found. And it's so unbelievably boring. They try to tell this Fern Gully history of the American Indian. And it's just tell the real story. It's a cool one.
Mike, we have about 20 seconds. Your favorite?
My favorite museum?
Yeah.
Not the Air and Space Museum. I think that's overrated. I wanted to ask Chris a question. Is that okay?
We have 20 seconds.
Who do you admire more, Don Lemon or Anderson Cooper, and why?
Ooh, definitely Don Lemon, because Anderson Cooper is so smooth, but Don Lemon's just aggressive stupidity is something to be admired.
He'll grab a story.
What an incredible way to end the mandate here in DC. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here again tomorrow night.